5 copper coins. The words fell into the vaulted auction hall like an insult. A ripple of laughter followed. Plain thing. Scarred. Mute. Not worth the iron on her wrists. The girl on the platform did not lower her gaze. She stood straight despite the rope biting into her wrists, despite the soot pressed into her skin, despite the torn gray shift that hung from her shoulders like something borrowed from disgrace. She did not flinch when someone in the back row laughed again. But she counted, not the insults, not the bids, the heartbeats between the guards, because she had stood in this building once before, not as Lot 7, as royalty. The gavel struck. Sold. The auctioneer barely raised his voice. 5 copper coins, the lowest price in Blackwood's history. No one looked twice as she was unhooked from the iron ring and handed off like grain. No one looked, except the Duke. Duke Brody Monroe had not taken a seat. He stood in the doorway, broad shoulders filling the stone arch, dark coat unadorned, expression carved from something colder than disdain. The room parted around him without instruction. Feared in Parliament, feared on the northern border, feared for never choosing a side unless he meant to break it. He had not come for a servant. He had come because Lord Gareth Penwick had publicly announced he intended to buy the mute girl for his country estate, and whatever Penwick desired, Brody Monroe did not permit him to have. 5 copper coins was not a purchase. It was a declaration. The steward placed the transfer papers into Brody's gloved hand. He signed without flourish and turned toward the night. Behind him she followed, not because the rope required it, because this exit led away from Penwick, and that was the only direction that mattered. The journey north was punishment disguised as travel. 3 days in a carriage that groaned at every rut in the frozen road. He rode on horseback the first 2 days. On the third, when rain struck sideways and the sky pressed low and gray, he climbed inside. They sat across from one another. He did not speak. She did not speak. The rain hammered the roof. Mud sucked at the wheels. Candlelight flickered between them. He studied her. Her silence did not sit like fear. It sat like choice. She wore it deliberately. Not shrinking, not pleading, not even resentful. Disciplined. Brody Monroe had commanded men into battle. He knew the posture of those trained to endure. This girl, this plain 5-coin servant, held herself like someone accustomed to being obeyed. Interesting. Dunmore Estate announced itself without beauty. Stone, iron, smoke, pine. No decorative flourishes, no ornamental gardens, a fortress masquerading as a manor, exactly like its duke. The staff lined the courtyard when he arrived. He dismounted without ceremony. "She'll take the east corridor chamber," he said flatly. "Library work." A servant. In the library, Mrs. Corwin Hale, the housekeeper of 19 Winters, raised an eyebrow but did not argue. The girl followed silently through the corridors, but her eyes moved, counting steps, marking exits, measuring angles of windows, noticing which floorboards betrayed weight. She catalogued everything. When she reached the small chamber assigned to her, she closed the door softly, sat on the edge of the narrow bed, pressed her palms flat to her knees, allowed herself one breath. Then she straightened her spine again. The library was not the room of a brute. Maps dominated the oak table, military routes, supply lines, border disputes, marked in red chalk. She dusted shelves as instructed, stacked loose correspondence. Then she stood at the table, studied the maps. He had corrected troop movement, adjusted defensive positions. But 2 river crossings were wrong, outdated, 4 years behind. Anyone following that route would lose wagons in mud. She glanced at the door, empty. The Duke rode the boundary at dawn. She picked up the red chalk. She did not erase his work. She refined it. A precise X where the river had silted. A corrected elevation at Aldener Pass. A margin note. Brief. Accurate. She set the chalk down. Continued dusting. When Brody returned that evening, his footsteps stopped outside the library. Silence. Not irritation. Consideration. He stepped inside. The map lay altered. Clean. Improved. He did not summon her. He did not speak her name. But the next morning, a new map waited. Messier. More flawed. A test. She corrected it. 9 days passed. No words exchanged. Only maps, and silence that was no longer indifferent. On the 10th morning, there was no map. There was a book. Open. Territorial law. Royal inheritance statutes. Her breath stilled. She closed the book, returned it to its proper shelf, as though she had never seen it. As though she had not memorized that exact chapter at 7 years old while standing in a royal library with her father's hand steady on her shoulder. She walked out without expression. But that night, The stable boy cried in the dark, and when she sang to calm him, an old lullaby, a royal lullaby, in the dialect erased after the coup, Duke Brodie Munro stood in the doorway, listening, not moving, and for the first time, the feared Duke did not look at her like a servant. He looked at her like a question. The stable door creaked softly in the wind. She did not stop singing. If she faltered now, it would be confession. The melody moved low and steady through the hay-scented air. Ancient court dialect wrapped in a lullaby no servant should know. Pip's breathing evened. The horses shifted. And still she sang. Only when the final note dissolved into silence did she lift her gaze. Duke Brodie Munro stood in the doorway. No candle in his hand. Only shadow. Only those dark assessing eyes. He did not accuse her. He did not interrupt. He simply watched. She rose slowly, brushing straw from her skirt, as though nothing unusual had occurred, as though royal lullabies were common in northern stables. Their eyes met across the sleeping child. He was not angry. He was calculating. And something else, something sharper than suspicion, recognition. "Interesting song," he said at last. Her expression did not shift. She dipped her head, not submissively but correctly. A servant's acknowledgement, nothing more. Brodie stepped aside, allowing her to pass first, a subtle courtesy no one else would have noticed. She walked through the doorway without haste, without fear, but her pulse struck once, hard and against her ribs. She had revealed too much, or perhaps exactly enough. The following morning, Dunmore felt different. Servants whispered. Mrs. Hale's eyes lingered. Aldrich avoided looking directly at her. And in the library a new map waited. Not northern borders this time, the southern trade territories. Worse errors, sloppier markings, as though placed deliberately wrong. A challenge. She stood before it a long moment, then picked up the chalk, corrected the grain tariffs, redrew the river route, adjusted the coastal defenses, left the handwriting precise but restrained. When she finished, she did not leave immediately. She sensed him. He was not in the doorway. He was inside the room, watching. "You read territorial law fluently," he said evenly. She kept her gaze on the parchment.
Silence.
"You move like trained military," he continued. Stillness. "And you sing like a woman raised in a palace nursery." The air thickened. She set the chalk down carefully, turned to face him, not defiant, not pleading, simply steady. He stepped closer, not invading, but testing the distance. "You are not mute," he said quietly. A statement, not a question. Her eyes flickered once. That was all. He studied her face as though the soot might peel back at any moment. "You were not meant for an auction block." There was no softness in his tone. "Only fact." Her chin lifted slightly. The smallest acknowledgement. He exhaled slowly. "Lord Penwick requested you specifically," Brodie said. "He has been collecting your curiosities, rare bloodlines, unusual traits." Her hands tightened at her sides. That at least he noticed. "He paid 20 coins for a minor baron's illegitimate son last winter," Brodie added. "He intended more than servant work." A flicker of something dark crossed her eyes. Fear? No. Fury. There it was. Not helpless. Not broken. Contained. He stepped back slightly. "You should know," he said, voice lower now, "I do not purchase what I cannot understand." Their gazes locked, and for the first time since the auction, she spoke. "Then perhaps, Your Grace, you should stop buying mysteries." Her voice was not what Dunmore expected. It was clear, measured, educated, every vowel shaped by aristocratic precision. Silence swallowed the room. Brodie did not react outwardly, but something inside him shifted. "You are aware," he said slowly, "that speaking now complicates matters." "Yes," she replied calmly. "Why speak at all?" Her eyes did not waver. "Because you already knew." The truth of it hung between them. He had known, or nearly, and she had confirmed it deliberately. Power had shifted. Not entirely, but enough. He turned away first. A rare concession. "You will attend dinner this evening," he said, tone returning to cool authority. "At the main table." A servant did not dine at the main table, but he did not retract it. She inclined her head, not grateful, not surprised, simply accepting the next move in a game neither of them had formally acknowledged playing. As she turned back toward the maps, Brodie paused at the door. "Lot 7, he said. She stilled. "That is not your name." Her reply came without hesitation. "No, Your Grace." He waited. She did not offer it, and after a long charged beat, he left. That evening the north wind howled against Dunmore's stone walls. Inside, a duke and a girl bought for 5 copper coins prepared to sit at the same table, and the household understood. Something dangerous had begun. Dinner at Dunmore was rarely an event. It was a necessity. Tonight it was a spectacle. The long oak table had been set with more candles than usual. Silver polished. Crystal placed. Mrs. Hale's staff moved with a stiffness that betrayed curiosity poorly disguised as discipline. She entered last, not because she had been summoned, because she understood timing. The gray servant's dress had been replaced with something darker, still simple but clean, structured. Her hair braided properly at the nape of her neck. No soot on her skin. Brodie Monroe was already seated at the head of the table. He did not rise, but his eyes lifted and held. Aldrich dropped his spoon. Mrs. Hale shot him a look sharp enough to cut rope. "She will dine," Brodie said calmly before anyone could ask. "As my guest." "Not servant, guest." A word with weight. She took the chair to his right, not trembling, not shrinking. The shift in the room was immediate. Whispers would follow. Rumors would move beyond Dunmore's gates. A duke did not elevate a servant publicly without intention. Wine was poured. The first course arrived. No one spoke. Finally, Brodie broke the silence. "You corrected the Southern Coast tariff figures incorrectly yesterday." Every servant stilled. He had called her out, publicly. Her fork did not pause. "The previous figures were based on pre-drought trade volumes," she replied evenly. "Those numbers no longer reflect reality." Mrs. Hale's gaze snapped to her. Aldrich blinked twice. Brodie leaned back slightly. "And you would know current trade volumes. How?" "A test. A trap," if she answered poorly. She lifted her eyes to his. "Because the drought affected 3 ports, not 1.
Silence.
Measured. Deliberate. And because the Navy reallocated ships north in the 3rd year." She returned to her meal as though discussing weather. Aldrich stopped breathing entirely. Brodie studied her without blinking. "You read military correspondence?" he asked. "Yes." The room went colder. Mrs. Hale cleared her throat. "With permission, Your Grace?" Brodie did not look away from the woman beside him. "She reads what I place before her. Not what she steals, not what she overhears, what I place before her. A statement of protection, unexpected." The tension shifted, subtle, but real. The remainder of dinner passed in cautious quiet. When it ended, she rose. So did he. "Walk with me," Brodie said. Not an order, an invitation dressed like one. They stepped into the northern courtyard. The air was sharp with frost. Moonlight silvered the stone. For a long moment neither spoke. "You calculated the map errors before I finished explaining them," he said finally. "Yes." "You assessed the intruder's training in under 4 seconds." "Yes." "You sing in a dialect outlawed after the coup." She did not answer. The wind moved between them. He stepped closer, not threatening, but nearer than before. "You are not merely hiding," he said quietly. "You are waiting." Her eyes lifted slowly. "And you, Your Grace," she replied, "are not merely collecting evidence." A faint shift in his jaw, she continued. "You have been preparing for something long before I arrived." He watched her, a battle general facing an equal strategist. "For 2 years," he said at last. The confession cost him something. "You investigate the coup," she said. "Yes." "You seek the rightful heir." His silence confirmed it. The frost beneath her shoes felt suddenly thin. "And if you found her?" she asked. He did not hesitate. "I would place a blade at her side. Not before her, not against her, beside her." The words landed heavier than any vow. Her breath caught just once. Power had shifted again. Not in dominance, in alliance. But alliances required truth. And truth was dangerous. Footsteps echoed from the corridor. Aldrich, breathless. "Your Grace," he said urgently. "A messenger from the capital." Brodie's gaze did not leave her face. "When?" he asked. "Arrived at dusk, Palace Seal." Silence fell hard between them. The king did not send letters without purpose, and purpose never meant safety. Brodie's voice lowered. "Stay in the east corridor tonight. A protective instruction, not confinement." She met his eyes. "If the palace writes," she said evenly, "it is not about your estate." It was about her, and they both knew it. The messenger waited inside. The north wind rose, and somewhere far beyond Dunmore's walls, a throne trembled. The palace seal was unbroken when Brodie entered his study. Heavy wax, impressed with the king's crest, deliberate, public, a message meant to be known. Cassidy stood by the window, hands folded before her, face calm, but she had not been told to remain. She had chosen to. Brodie broke the seal without flourish. His eyes moved across the page once, then again. The room grew colder. "Well?" she asked quietly. He did not hand her the letter. He read aloud. By order of His Majesty, all northern estates are to submit updated household registries, including recent acquisitions, guests, and contracted servants. He lowered the page. There is a description. Her heartbeat did not change. Brown-haired, he continued. Recently purchased. Female. Approximately 5 and 20. Silence stretched. The palace has received a report, he said evenly, that Dunmore acquired a woman at auction whose identity is unclear. She did not look surprised. She had expected this. The question was not if, it was how soon. How many days, she asked. 10, he replied. Perhaps 12 before a formal envoy arrives. 10 days to prepare or to run. Brody watched her carefully. If you wish to leave, he said, tone neutral but edged with something restrained. I will arrange it. A carriage before dawn, safe passage north of the border. He would do it, and it would cost him. She turned from the window slowly. And you? She asked. I remain, even if it places you under suspicion. His jaw tightened. I have survived suspicion before. She studied him for a long moment. You did not bid 5 copper coins merely to spite Lord Penwick, she said softly. A pause. No. You were already searching. Another pause. Yes. For the Valerius heir. He did not answer, but he did not deny it. The silence confirmed everything. She crossed the room and took the letter from his hand. Read it. Not as a servant deciphering unfamiliar script, but fluently, easily. The ink did not tremble beneath her gaze. The king grows nervous, she murmured. He would not issue a registry audit otherwise. Brody watched her profile in the candlelight. You speak of him as if you know his temperament. I do. A simple truth. He stepped closer. The mark, he said quietly. She did not turn. You recognized it. Yes. And yet you said nothing. He held her gaze when she finally faced him. Because the moment I say it aloud, he said evenly, it becomes treason. There it was. The cost. Not admiration, not awe. Treason. Why keep the book on inheritance laws open, she asked. To see if you would touch it. And when I did not, I knew you already had. Their eyes locked. Something unspoken passed between them. Understanding, recognition, and something far more dangerous. Trust. She moved away first. 10 days is not enough time to disappear safely, she said. The palace will send riders to every northern crossing. Then what do you propose, he asked. She turned back to him. The calm was gone now. In its place. Fire. The winter masquerade. Brody's expression sharpened. It is in 9 days, she continued. Every lord will attend, every military family. The palace will be full. And you intend to walk into the king's hall? He asked flatly. I intend, she said, voice steady, to stop hiding. The air between them shifted. This was no longer a question of survival. It was a declaration of war. If this fails, he said quietly, you will not be imprisoned. I know. You will be killed. I know. He stepped closer, close enough that the candlelight caught the edge of the star-shaped birthmark where it met her collar. Close enough that the weight of his presence felt almost protective. Why now, he asked. Her answer was not political. It was not strategic. My brother, she said. His eyes darkened. Where? Labor camp outside the capital. The words were calm. The pain beneath them was not. If I remain hidden, she continued, he dies forgotten. A silence heavier than any before settled between them. Brody Monroe had built his reputation on refusing causes, on staying detached, on surviving by choosing no side. He looked at her now, and knew he had already chosen. Very well, he said at last. 2 words, irreversible. Her breath released slowly. What we do next, he continued, voice colder now, sharper, we do completely. Not half measures, not secrecy alone. War. She nodded once. The alliance was sealed, not with romance, not with vows, but with something older. Shared risk. Outside, the northern wind struck the manor walls. Inside, a duke and a hidden queen began planning the fall of a king, and neither of them intended to lose. Preparation did not look like rebellion. It looked like silk. Bolts of deep blue and winter white began arriving at Dunmore under the polite disguise of estate purchases. A dressmaker was summoned from Inverleigh. Jewels were quietly evaluated. Measurements were taken. Mrs. Hale supervised with military precision. Cassidy endured it. She stood straight while Edith Marrow circled her with pins between her lips. Lift your chin. She did, shoulders back. They were all ready. You carry yourself like nobility, the dressmaker muttered before she could stop herself. Cassidy did not answer. Across the room, Brody watched. Not openly, but he watched every adjustment of fabric. Every moment her spine aligned naturally with the posture of someone born to command rather than serve. He had seen soldiers try to imitate authority. This was not imitation. This was memory. At dawn, however, Silk was abandoned. The courtyard frost cracked under their boots. Brody entered without announcement. She was already there, working through the defensive sequence her father had drilled into her from childhood. Step inside the arc. Deflect the force. Redirect. Control. She moved with clean precision despite the cold biting her fingers. Brody did not speak. He removed his coat, drew his practice blade, came at her without warning. She pivoted, caught his wrist, redirected his weight. He adjusted instantly. Their movements were quiet, controlled, dangerously intimate. Not flirtation, not gentleness. Respect. Steel met steel in restrained rhythm. 20 minutes passed before he stepped back. "You anticipate my reach," he said evenly. "You telegraph your shoulder," she replied. His brow lifted, a rare flicker. "Most men would not say that to me." "I'm not most men." The corner of his mouth almost moved. Almost. That evening the first gown was completed. Deep Valerius blue. 7-pointed star embroidered subtly at the collar in gold thread. She stood before the mirror. Brody stood behind her, not touching, never touching. "You look like a queen," he said quietly. She met his reflection. "I look like a target." The truth hung sharp between them. He stepped closer, close enough that the warmth of him brushed her shoulder. "If anyone in that hall reaches for you," he said, voice low and final, "they answer to me." Her pulse betrayed her then, just once. "You would risk your estates," she said. "I would risk more than that." The words came before he could temper them. Silence followed. Dangerous silence, because this was no longer solely strategy. He saw it. She saw it, and that made it far more fragile. She turned away first. "We cannot afford sentiment," she said carefully. His jaw tightened. "You think this is sentiment?" "I think," she replied, steady but softer now, "that you have built your life on control, and I am disrupting it." A beat. "You're not disrupting it," he said. "You are redefining it." The admission cost him. She felt it, and for the first time since Dunmore, her composure thinned. "You do not know what standing beside me means," she said quietly. "You do not know what the throne will demand." "I know precisely what it demands," he answered. "And you still choose it?" His eyes did not waver. "I choose you." The air stilled. Not grand, not theatrical, but undeniable. Her throat tightened. Not because she was weak, because she had trained herself never to want, and wanting was far more dangerous than war. She stepped back, reclaimed space. "We survived the masquerade first," she said. "Yes. And after?" He did not answer immediately, because after meant crown, after meant politics, after meant sacrifice, but his gaze remained steady. "After," he said quietly, "we see who is left standing." Footsteps echoed in the corridor. Aldrich's voice. "The palace envoy has crossed the northern bridge. 2 days early." The moment shattered. Reality rushed in. 2 days early meant suspicion. Pressure. No room for hesitation. Cassidy moved first. "Then we leave at dawn." Brody nodded. The masquerade was no longer a plan. It was a countdown. And beneath the strategy, beneath the silk, beneath the war, something far more perilous had begun to take root between them. They rode before sunrise. No farewell, no announcement. Dunmore's gates opened to frost and silence as 3 carriages and a covered supply wagon rolled onto the northern road. Cassidy sat in the supply wagon, hood drawn low, hands folded, invisible again. The last time, she told herself. The last time she would bow her head for survival instead of strategy. Brody rode beside the lead carriage, unmistakable, unyielding. The envoy arriving early meant one thing. The king had grown impatient, and impatient kings made mistakes. They reached the capital on the second evening. The palace rose ahead, swollen with new towers and excessive gilding, the architectural insecurity of a man who had stolen more than land. Cassidy watched from beneath her hood. She felt no fear, only clarity. Brody arranged rooms at a respectable inn under proper ducal credentials. The winter masquerade invitation, long ignored in previous years, would now be honored. It was bold. It was deliberate. It was dangerous. Perfect. Near midnight, in the small candlelit room overlooking the city, evidence lay spread across the table. Testimonies, signed accounts, military dispatches proving the massacre of the Valerius loyalists. Cassidy read each page carefully, not skimming, absorbing, mapping. Brody stood by the window at first, watching the palace, watching her. You are very calm, he said. If I allow myself to feel everything, she replied quietly, I will not move at all. He turned toward her. You do not have to carry this alone. A dangerous offer. She lifted her eyes. I have carried it alone for 10 years. A pause, then softer. That is not a complaint. It was fact. He crossed the room, set both hands on the table, leaning closer. If something goes wrong tomorrow, he said, voice lower now, stripped of distance, you do not speak first. You let me. She shook her head once. No. His jaw tightened. You think I will hide behind you? I think you are valuable, he answered sharply. And I am not? Silence hit hard. That was not what he meant, but it was what she heard. He stepped back. I will not watch you die. And I will not watch you sacrifice everything for a crown that may not even remain mine, she replied. Their eyes locked. This was no longer politics. It was something raw. You do not trust me, he said quietly. I trust you with my life, she answered immediately. And yet, she continued, voice steady but edged now, you still believe protection means standing in front of me. He stared at her. Then slowly, very slowly, he understood. You do not need shielding, he said. I need partnership. The word landed between them like a drawn line. He exhaled once, then nodded. Then we stand together. Not before, not behind, together. A knock came at the door. Aldrich entered, pale. The envoy has arrived in the city, he said. They begin inquiries at dawn. Brody looked at Cassidy. We move tonight. Not tomorrow. Tonight, the documents would be distributed before the masquerade began, placed in the hands of lords who had long waited for proof stronger than rumor. Cassidy gathered the pages carefully. Her fingers did not tremble, but when she stood, Brody caught her wrist, not forcefully, just enough to stop her. If we survive this, he said quietly, no witnesses, no performance, do not disappear again. Her breath caught. That was not a strategic request. That was personal. She studied him. The feared Duke, the man who had bought her for 5 copper coins to spite a rival, the man who had investigated her bloodline in secret, the man who now risked everything. I will not run, she said. A promise. He released her. They stepped into the corridor together. The palace lights burned in the distance, music already drifting faintly across the winter air. The masquerade had begun, and before dawn, the first move would be made. The great hall glittered like a lie. Crystal chandeliers blazed overhead. Silk and velvet shimmered beneath candlelight. Masks concealed ambition, betrayal, fear. Music swelled from the upper gallery. Laughter rang too loudly, and at the far end of the hall, beneath a canopy of gold-threaded banners, the king sat crowned and watching. Cassidy entered through the servants' corridor. Head lowered, cloak plain, invisible. Brody entered from the grand staircase, unmistakable in black. Every noble eye tracked him. The Duke, who had ignored the last 3 winter invitations, had chosen tonight to attend. That alone unsettled the room. The first document changed hands near the west pillar. A sealed testimony slipped into a gloved palm. The second was delivered in the gallery. The third in the shadow of a marble column. Whispers began before the wine finished pouring. Brows furrowed behind jeweled masks. A murmur passed like wind through silk. Brody crossed the hall deliberately, greeting no one. Waiting, watching. The king shifted in his seat. Something was wrong. He could feel it. Cassidy moved toward the east wing. The holding chamber. Her brother waited there, thinner than memory but alive. She stepped inside. He looked up. For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Then, Cass. Not formal, not royal, just her name. She crossed the room and cupped his face in her hands. You leave with Aldrich, she said steadily. You do not look back. His jaw set. I stay. You live, she corrected. Footsteps approached. Time ended. She pressed her forehead briefly to his, then stepped away. The music faltered in the great hall. One lord stood, mask removed, document raised. My king, he said clearly, I believe this concerns us all. The murmuring swelled. Another voice joined. Then another, testimonies read aloud, names spoken, dates cited, massacre detailed, the coup laid bare without embellishment. The king rose abruptly. This is treason. His guard moved forward. Steel whispered from scabbards. Brody drew first, not dramatically, not recklessly. Simply stepped between the advancing guard and the center of the hall. Blade steady, eyes cold. You will not touch her, he said. The words carried. And in that moment, Cassidy stepped forward. She reached for the clasp at her shoulder, removed the plain cloak. Silk fell away. Deep Valerius blue caught the candlelight, 7-pointed star gleaming at her collar. Gasps rippled outward. The king's face drained of color. Impossible. Dead. Erased. And yet, she stood, spine straight, chin lifted. She did not shout. She did not tremble. She spoke in the old court dialect, clear, measured. The command oath, the sequence bound to the palace guard generations before the coup. The words only true Valerius blood could speak without falter. The first guard hesitated, then turned. The second followed. Not all, but enough. Steel shifted direction. The king staggered back. "This is deception," he roared. Cassidy stepped closer. "Then test me," she said calmly. Silence crushed the hall. Every noble in attendance understood what they were witnessing, not rebellion, legitimacy. The king lunged toward her in fury. Brody intercepted him with a single movement. Steel met steel. A flash. A clash. The sound rang sharp through the hall. Brody disarmed him cleanly. Not humiliation, efficiency. The borrowed crown slipped from the king's head, struck marble, rolled, stopped at Cassidy's feet. No one moved. She looked down at it, then at the room. "Remove him," she said quietly, and the guard obeyed. The hall emptied slowly. Shock replacing spectacle. Whispers replaced music. Brody stood beside her, breathing steady, not triumphant, not smiling, simply there. The throne loomed behind them, unclaimed. She did not sit. Not yet. There were laws, assemblies, procedures. She would not seize what must be restored. But as the hall cleared, a final voice echoed from the entrance. "Seize them." Palace reinforcements flooded the corridor. The loyalists, the men who had not turned. Steel surrounded them. Brody stepped closer to her, not shielding, standing aligned, shoulder to shoulder. The confrontation had not ended. It had only escalated, and this time, it would not be words that decided it. Steel closed in. The loyalist guard advanced from the eastern corridor, boots striking marble in brutal rhythm. They had not taken the oath of Valerius blood. They had taken the oath of coin. Brody shifted half a step closer, not in front of her. Aligned, as promised. "Behind me if it breaks," he murmured. "Beside you," she corrected softly. The captain of the loyalists raised his blade. "For the king!" "For the crown," Cassidy answered, and this time the words carried differently. Not shouted, claimed. The hall was no longer full of revelers. It was full of witnesses, lords who had read the documents, families who had lost sons in the coup, men who had waited 10 years for permission to act. The first clash came hard. Brody met the captain's strike cleanly, turning the blade with controlled force rather than fury. He did not fight wildly. He fought precisely. Cassidy moved with him, inside the arc, redirect, control. She disarmed one guard with a twist of her wrist, sending steel skidding across marble. Another lunged. She stepped toward him, not away, deflecting his weight and driving him to his knees. Gasps rippled. Not because she fought like someone trained in a royal courtyard, not a servant's yard. The tide shifted. One noble stepped forward, then another, swords drawn, not in chaos, indecision. The captain faltered as 3 blades turned toward him. And then, he dropped his weapon. It struck the marble with a hollow finality. Silence fell like snowfall. The remaining loyalists lowered theirs one by one. The sound of surrender was softer than battle, but heavier. Brody did not chase them. He did not boast. He stood breathing steadily, eyes scanning for the next threat that never came. Cassidy stepped toward the fallen crown. She bent, picked it up, not reverently, not greedily, steadily. She turned to the assembly. "I will not claim what must be granted by law," she said clearly. "The council will convene at dawn. The evidence will be reviewed publicly, and if I am found unworthy, I will step aside." A murmur passed. Not doubt. Respect. This was not conquest. It was restoration. Her brother appeared at the far archway, guarded, but unharmed. Pip Vane clung stubbornly to Aldrich's coat beside him, eyes enormous but fearless. Cassidy's composure wavered for the briefest breath, then steadied. Brody watched her, not as a question now, as certainty. When the hall finally emptied, when the guards had escorted the former king away, when only candlelight and echoes remained, she sat on the steps below the throne, not on it, below it. Brody joined her, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "You did not hesitate," he said quietly. "Neither did you." A faint curve touched his mouth. "Window latches," she said after a moment, staring at the empty hall. He glanced sideways. "At Dunmore," she clarified, "they require replacing." A soft breath left him. I will see to it. Silence settled, not tense, not uncertain.
Full!
You understand, she said carefully, that being queen means I do not belong to myself. His jaw tightened slightly. I understand. And you would still stand beside me? He turned toward her fully now. I stood beside you when you were worth 5 copper coins, he said evenly. Titles do not change my position. Her breath caught. This time she did not hide it. Outside, dawn began to bleed pale light through the high windows. A new day, a fragile kingdom, a throne waiting to be legally restored. She rose slowly. He rose with her. Not behind, not ahead, together. At the doorway her brother waited. Pip grinned shyly. The northern duke and the once-forgotten servant walked forward to meet them. Not as master and purchase, not as rescuer and rescued, but as 2 people who had chosen each other in the most dangerous room in the kingdom. And this time, no one in the hall would ever call her plain again.